So in this video, I wanted to go over just a small part of Lab 1.1, Welcome to Snap, that a lot of scholars get stuck on. So for most of Lab 1.1, all you really need to do is follow the instructions, put some code into Snap, and figure out what it does. And as you go through this lab, I really do ask that you put all of this code into Snap, click Run, and see what it does. Follow this lesson step by step because it is one of those lessons where, or one of those labs where after you've done it, you'll have a great understanding of all of the tools in Snap, and it's really going to set you up for success for the rest of the year. So definitely make sure that you try out all the code that you see, find out what it does, answer all of these questions in bold because that's what I'll be looking for. But definitely try out all of this code and make sure you know what it does yourself. And this is one of the longer labs for that reason, that you really are learning all the different blocks in Snap. But one of the things that I wanted to specifically go over, and if you're not at this point yet, I do implore you to kind of pause this video, work through some of the lab, and get to part 9 before you watch the rest of this video. And actually, if you'd like to, please try part 9 on your own before you watch the rest of this video. This really is a video for people who are stumped on part 9. So part 9 is asking you to make a kaleidoscope. Specifically, they want you to make a little drawing program that when you move your mouse, 4 little sprites draw these lines and follow you around the screen. And if you've gotten pretty close through this lab so far, you've already probably figured out the main part, which is how to make a sprite follow your mouse while drawing on the screen using the forever blocks and using the pen tool. But in this video specifically, I'm going to talk about how do we get another sprite to follow along and be a mirror image of the sprite that's following our mouse. So if you look at this red and green one, you can see, okay, I have a red one and a green one, and the red one is doing the movement, and the green one is doing the opposite of that movement. Well, how do I make that happen in Snap? And you can actually try to move a lot of these blocks around, especially these operator blocks that they showed you over here. Mouse X plus 1, mouse Y plus 1, mouse X plus 30. Try out those different operator blocks and see what you get, but I'm going to provide a little helping hand, if you will. So I'm going to show you a code that I wrote pretty quickly to make a sprite follow my mouse across the screen. So what I have here is when I press the space key, we're going to put the pen down. This pen's going to be this shade of red-ish color. And then I have a forever block after that that says follow my mouse and follow it in the X position, the left and right, and the Y position, the up and down. So if I go over here and hit the space key, you'll see that my sprite is following my mouse both in the X and the Y position forever and ever and ever until I hit the stop button. Now you also see that when I do hit the stop button, I still have all these squiggles across my screen. So I wrote a quick little program using blocks over here. In the pen palette, I use the clear and pen up buttons to clear the screen of all the ink, pick up the pen, and then last one I used a motion block to send the sprite back toward the middle, go to 0x, 0y. So if I just click this, it clears my screen and puts the sprite back towards the center, which is very helpful. So you can see here I have the sprite following my mouse. I can stop it, and I can clear the whole deal. And one thing I actually might add is I might do it this way too. Might assign that to a key, and you'll see why in a second. So now I can use space to do this, stop it, press the C key to clear. And you'll see why I did that in a second. So now I need to make a second sprite that will do the opposite of what my mouse is doing. And one way that I'm going to show you to do this is I could go ahead down here and add a second sprite, and then place that sprite wherever I want it and rewrite the code to make it follow my mouse. But there is a quicker way to do it. So if you already have a sprite that has the code, and you know that the next sprite is going to have very similar code, one way you can save time is just by right-clicking that sprite and clicking duplicate. And that'll make an exact copy of that sprite that has the same code. So if you see here, if I click on the first sprite, if I click on the second sprite, they have the same code. These are two different sprites. You can see up here the name. This is the first sprite, this one. This is the second sprite, this one. And they have the exact same code because this sprite is just a copy of this one. All right, So now if I go ahead and try out my code, you can see here that if I hit space, both sprites move towards the same location and are following my mouse. And it's hard to see right now, but both sprites are following my mouse. Actually, I can do it this way. If I take the second sprite here and I change his color, let's say to yellow, and then I press the C key to clear, and then I hit space. Actually, you can't see it, but the red, actually you can see it. The red and the yellow are mixing together to make orange because both sprites are following my mouse at the same time, which is not what I want. So if I go ahead and hit the stop button and clear it, now what I can use is these operator blocks to make the second sprite, the yellow one, work a little differently than the red one. So let's go to the yellow sprite here, and I'm going to use an operator block, and the one that I'm going to use is actually the multiplication block. Because what I want is my second sprite to do the opposite of the first one. And another way for the opposite is the inverse. And another way to get the inverse is multiplying by -1. And you can think about it this way. If my mouse goes to x1, well, I want the other sprite that's doing the mirror image to go to -1. So how do I get 1 and -1? I multiply by -1, right? If my sprite goes to maybe +5, I want the yellow sprite to maybe go to -5, right? So how do I get that? I multiply 5 by -1. So if I go ahead and take these mouse X and mouse Y blocks off, I'm going to, in the place of the go to X0, go to Y0 blocks, I'm going to go ahead and put these multiplication blocks. And what I'm going to tell it is whatever mouse X is, I want you to do the opposite of that, and you'll figure that out by multiplying by -1. And then if you want to do the opposite of the Y block, the Y mouse, you're going to multiply that by -1 to get the opposite. So now when I press the space key, you can see the red and the yellow are going to do the opposite of it. And there we go, we have a very simple kaleidoscope. And you can continue to play around with this to get 4 sprites on the screen, and they'll all do the opposite of each other. And that's kind of how you do it. Now I mentioned I was programming this C key here for a reason. It's because when I press the C key, it will clear both my sprites. Why does it do that? Well, it's the same reason why the space key works, right? If I look at the code, the C key for sprite 1 and the C key for sprite 2 are both programmed to clear that ink, bring the pen up for both sprites, and send both sprites to 0, 0, right? The red one goes to 0, 0, and the yellow one goes to 0, 0. And the only difference now between these two codes, I mean, and the same is true for when the space key is pressed, both sprites are putting their pen down, both sprites are setting their color to something, whether it's red or yellow. The only difference is where the sprites are moving. One is moving in the opposite, or doing the inverse of what the X and Y directions are, and that's determined by where my mouse is, and one is just following my mouse. So that is your very simple kaleidoscope, and I do implore you to explore more and make a few more sprites, add a few more colors, and see if you can't make 4 sprites appear on the screen in your kaleidoscope. Have fun.